All right. Thank you so much for waiting. Very good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of you, wherever you all are joining us from. Just a second. I just want to make sure Anu is with us. Anu, are you able to hear me? All right, great.
I'll manage it. I told him I will tell him so I remember very clearly, I checked my notes. I'd only told him 1.5. So he would have just assumed 1.5.
Hello, everyone, again. So before we proceed with the session, first of all, thank you so much for joining us in such large numbers. It's been a wonderful response. And yes, we're all looking forward to hearing from Anu about her journey and her book. Well, a little bit about myself. I'm Dr. Mamata. I am a professor with Global Next University. Other than the regular teaching that I'm involved with on the MBA, DBA, and MMIT programs, I'm very closely involved with the women's leadership program that we have. And that's one reason why we have the session as well. So we are very happy today that we have a very special guest, Ms. Anuranjita Kumar, MD and Chief Human Resource Officer, Citibank South Asia, with us today. Anu has agreed to share her journey, her experiences, her insights, and something about her book with us today. And she will also, she has kindly consented to take some questions from us and from the panel. Thank you, Anu. Thanks for joining us. Wonderful to have you here. So a little bit about Anu. She is the Managing Director and Chief Human Resource Officer with the City South. She's worked across various regions, APAC, Europe, India, USA, and various human resource roles. And she also holds several board and management committee positions in City, as well as other foundations, committees, and organizations. She's received several recognitions that is listed too here. She's among the most powerful HR professionals of India by World HRD Congress in 2012, and amongst the most powerful women leaders in Fortune 2013. She's also a certified executive coach and senior trainer in City. In terms of education, Anu has a management degree from XLRI, specializing in HR, and is a gold medalist and topper in industrial psychology. She does a lot of social work, volunteers with underprivileged children, and also works with the Cherry Blair Foundation for Women, where she has pledged all the royalties from her book. So just to give you a brief, the session is for about 45 minutes here. 12:15 your time, Anu will be leaving for a next appointment, so we'll try and manage within that time. So this is a book that Anu has written and recently launched. Now, I won't take too much time. I will hand it over to Anu to share with us about the book. So Anu, we'd like to hear from you what the book really meant for you. What was it like, writing the book? What made you, what inspired you to write the book?
Some key people, if they want to call.
Yeah, I guess 7 p.m.
Anu, are you with us?
Just not good.
Sorry, I think. Anu, yeah, we are ready to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Anu, we can hear you now. So I just introduced you, and we are on the slide where we are talking about your book, and we'd like to hear from you about the book, about your process. I mean, what really inspired you to write this book? What was the idea behind actually writing the book, and your journey, your thoughts on the book?
Sure. Well, thank you, Mamata, and thanks to everybody who joined this webinar. It's a pleasure to be here and, interacting with so many of you. I'm really humbled by the number of people who are on this call. So I would try and, spend some quality time talking through my journey and the book as well. Mamata, just that I can't see too many. I can only see the overall slide. I cannot see if you're able to see that at my end. So, if there's a technical glitch, then just keep telling me which slide you're on, so at least then I have.
Sure. Shishina, can we have the slide on Anu's book? It is a slide saying about the book.
Yes, Mamata, I've changed it.
All right. You're able to see the slide now, Anu? It's about the book.
Okay, no, not at mine. Let me just call Laura.
I just have the picture of your book on the
Okay.
slide. That's it.
Okay, fair enough. So, look, I think, given, my journey is actually not an extraordinary journey. It's, this book is a summary of not just my journey, but for a lot of people who I crossed my path with. And this is not just my story, but it's a story of all those people as well. And I think, I genuinely believe that all of us have a book within us because every journey is unique. Now, for me specifically, I come from a small town called Rishikesh. I don't know how many of you have been there. Some of you might have ventured there for rafting. My parents had a transferable job, so they were moving around, and my early years were in Rishikesh. Because my father was working with a pharmaceutical plant and my mother is a doctor. And because they had a kind of a job which was transferable, I went to boarding very early in my life, and I went to Dehradun in Walland. Coming from a middle-class Indian family, there was a huge premium on education. We were two sisters, and my mother specifically wanted one of us to be a doctor when we grow up. So, I think me being the elder one, took up sciences and maths, and I was this nice kid, and, and then decided that maybe at some level I should fulfill my mother's expectations, and hence I decided to take a medical exam. And unfortunately for me, I even made it. And even more unfortunately, I made it to the same college which my mother had come from or graduated from. So I had no reasons where, if I was debating at all, I really had no reasons to debate about doing this course. I went to the medical college, and after 6 months, I started to feel that it wasn't my calling. Every day I would get up in the morning and I would feel a bit claustrophobic going for lectures. My interest was waning. Something in my heart was telling me I wasn't really enthused about it. And that feeling kept growing and growing over the next few months. And as a result, sometime in November of '89, when I came home, I had a conversation with my parents and said, I really don't want to do this. And they were quite shocked, especially my mother, because, she really aspired one of her kids to be a doctor. And we had as you can imagine, there was a huge chaos at home. And I kept saying, look, I don't want to do it because I'm just not, I just don't feel enthused about it. My parents really couldn't understand why I didn't feel enthused about it because they felt it was a noble profession. I couldn't understand why they couldn't understand why I didn't feel enthused about it because my heart was not in it. And therein ensued a huge debate. And my father, who's had 3 women in his life, my sister, me, and my mother, obviously has a huge, he's become a mediator and a very good mediator at that. So started to mediate between me and my mom. And finally, I think the rebellious in me took over, and I said, I'm just not going back to college. And they finally said, okay, so what do you want to do? And I said, well, I don't know what I want to do. At all of 17, what do you know what you want to do? But I know what I don't want to do, and this is not what I want to do. I mean, believe you me, I think my parents would have at that point of time thought, "Bas ho gaya, this is it. We should now get her married off after her graduation because don't think this is going in the right direction." Right? Very normal reaction. And then, after some diligence, I came back to my parents and said, "I want to study psychology." They were quite shocked and said, "What is psychology?" They didn't even know it started with a P, leave alone what the subject would entail. And I kind of tried to very, very unsuccessfully explain it to them. But I think they pretty much left me to my own, and therein started my own journey about betting on myself. I wasn't sure whether I took the right decision. I just didn't know where I was, whether this will take the right course. I just know I traveled a road which was probably less traveled by others and was a bit more unorthodox. And finally, I did fell in love with the subject. I did very well. I kind of then decided to think about whether I should graduate in the subject or should I get on to something else. And that's how HR came about. But I think that's the first lesson for me in life, and that's the first lesson in the book about how you decide what you want to do. What is the choice you want to make? What is your purpose? Where do you want to take this to? And every time I've stumbled in different crossroads in my life, I go back to that first lesson about where am I headed and what is that my purpose? What is the clarity that I'm looking for? And then I start to take the clouds away. But I think this was the background, and the trigger for me to write the book was about what? I think this was October of 2014, wherein I was in Mumbai and my family lives in Gurgaon. I kind of keep ping-ponging between two cities. My son, who was all of 10, met with a very, very fatal accident, and he was in the ICU. And, I was a very nervous mother that evening, and it was probably the longest 1.5-hour flight that I took back to Delhi that evening. And there were multiple thoughts which went through my head that, maybe I should have been with him. Why did this happen? Am I too selfish? Should I be at home? Am I not a good mother? And in that moment, I could have taken any decision, including chucking up my career, had it not been the support from my husband and my family. My son did get okay by God's grace. He's back on his feet. He went to school and he's a normal kid, and he's back on his cycle again, which is how he met with the accident. But I think when I went through that emotional turbulence, I realized that so many people would go through this. And in that moment of heat, you take decisions about your life and work. But it is that moment. That accident could have happened even if I was at home, because I can't keep following around my son. Even if I was at home, what could I do about it? But that rationality is not there when you go through that crisis. And I think it's after that episode, I decided to put a pen to the paper and live through and reflect back on, several decades of my life and pen it down in a way that makes sense for many readers. And, they hopefully take away something from that.
Excellent. And it does help. I read the book, and every time I read literature on this topic, it's really inspiring. It makes you feel that, okay, you're not the only one going through those guilty feelings and those emotional moments when you feel, what am I doing after all? So it was an amazing read. That brings me to the next question, Anu. And yes, you've kind of encapsulated everything about the book and everything about the challenges we usually face so well. The first question that I have is on clarity and choices. I think that is how you started the book, and I think it was a very brilliant way to start. Most of these questions, just to give you a little bit of background, come from the participants that we have in our Women's Leadership Program. And that's where I kind of compiled what topics come up for discussion usually, and I've tried to frame those as questions. So you'll see that the questions are kind of longish, so please bear with me on that. So the first question is on clarity and making choices. This is where I feel we still do struggle. A lot of times I feel that we're not really clear or firm in what we believe in. And so that is one thing, and yes, you kind of said how you had to make certain choices, how it impacted your journey. But the question here is sometimes the choices that we make are kind of against the societal norms and family expectations. How do you think we can manage such situations?
I think, the example that I illustrated where I give up a career, which is actually one of the more preferred careers, and go and do something on my own. I know a lot of people who are faced with this choice. The question is what you do. When your heart says something else, and your mind says something else, and your parents say something else, and your husband says something else, what do you do? And very often, as a woman, I decide that without calling myself selfish, that sometimes there are situations where only one of you can be happy, be it your husband, be it your parents, be it your children, be it you. So very often when I look at those, conflicting situations, I decide I'm going to keep myself at peace, because if I'm myself at peace, then I can actually navigate the situation much better. So I think when there are social demands and there are, conflicting choices you're faced with, the one thing you have to do is believe in yourself. I know it's very cliched, and I know you would have read this in many books, but believe you me, when I've written about so many people in that book, in terms of having, problems in life or going through ups and downs, you're as unique as anybody else. I've had mothers come and talk to me when they're on maternity, how do I leave a 3 months behind? And I'm like, there are mothers who work, talk to them. There are people who will say, oh, my husband's moving or my spouse is moving. What do I do? Should I just quit? No, but it depends on how much credence you give to your own career. So I call it like a 3M crossroad when I say, and this is specifically referring to women, where I say, when there is a marriage, when women have to be faced with socio-cultural choices, where husband may work somewhere else, or, sometimes family has different norms or different expectations, and women decide not to pursue their career. Now, that's not what they want to do, but they're being guided by the family. My point is very simple. If you're making a choice to be a stay-at-home wife or stay-at-home mom, and you're doing it very willingly, this is really what makes you happy, it's absolutely fine. If you're making a choice under duress, because somebody else expects this, but this is not what your heart really wants, you're never going to be happy. So how does that make you a good wife or a good mother anyway? So I think you've got to think that through when you're getting married. Very often my debates happen with women when they just give up their careers. And it's like, you kind of start to bang your head and think, oh, why don't you think about your own life and your own career and what do you want to do? It's a choice. But the data will show you in most organizations that when they get married, or when I talk about the second crossroad, which is mobility, when a spouse is getting transferred, very willingly, most women will say, okay, let me just give it up. Go find another job, not a career. I'll find myself something. Of course you'll find yourself something. But then what's the point of having all this education? Making you a more aware individual means you also make difference to yourself and change certain social norms. And I'm not for a minute saying you've got to be rebellious about it, but you've got to make choices not just for yourself, but for the people who will look at you as a role model as well. So I think marriage and mobility are choices which very often women make to keep others happy. And I think it's about believing in yourself and being aware of what you want, not from a short-term perspective, but a medium-term perspective. I'm not saying take a 20-year view, but at least take a 5 to 8 year view about what your life is going to be. Because if you have your own identity, then you will be able to help many others around you, including your family. The third crossroad, which is maternity, is always a little more tougher for most women.
Yes.
Actually, to be honest, I think parenting is a beautiful journey for both parents, father and mother. But again, as Mamata, you said, the expectations, the socio-cultural factors, how do you contend with moms and mother-in-laws telling you, oh, when you have a baby, your first responsibility is look after the child. These are your significant others. And as an organization, I can do what I can. I can do flexibility, I can do maternity, I can do what I can. But till that mindset changes, I'm not going to make a huge delta impact. And frankly, I think, I do agree that children do need mother a little bit more because of the physiological needs in the first year. But in a career of 30 years, if you give yourself to a baby for 6 months to 12 months, that's not end of the road. The problem we have is in spite of a 6-month maternity leave, most women don't come back. Because they said, "Ho gaya, this is it. I'm not sure I want to pursue any more career because huge pressure. I don't want to leave my baby with a maid because um, it's not great." Well, I'll tell you what, a lot of kids have grown up in the right way with the right support system. If it's not your maid, well, make friends with your mother and mother-in-law, get them to support you. So there are ways to work through your support structure. The question is, do you have the will to go on? So I have a huge amount of push on these choices about what's your aspiration, what's your awareness level, and what's your attitude. It's those 3 A's, in my view, which will help you decide and make the right choices about what you want to persist with.
Yes. Wonderful, Anu. And in fact, in answering this question, you've also answered one other question that I had. The thing is support system. And I've been reading a lot about this. A lot of the women leaders talk about it in different words. We have some, say, coping mechanisms, support system, support network. But the thing is to build your own support system and, the seamless parenting like Indra Nui also recently shared. Okay.
Yeah.
Anu, my next question is on travel.
Yeah.
And most of them that I know hesitate to actually take on a bigger role. They, in fact, don't take up promotions, and that's really sad. They don't take up promotions because they say, no, I will have to travel, and I can't do that. How can we manage that? I mean, you've done a wonderful job. I've read it, and you said you've in fact worked out of London when your family was in Delhi. You still travel between 2 cities in India. How do you manage that, and what's your suggestion?
I think, people get scared about travel. I think the first time so let me go back in time. When I got married, when I graduated out of campus, even before I got married, I joined PNG from campus, and my husband joined Unilever. So we had this bit of a strife at home: should we use Ariel or should we use Surf Excel? And for the sake of my marital bliss, one of us decided to move on, and that is how I landed up with City. Even he was looking around, but I keep laughing. Maybe I was more employable then. So I kind of moved on with City. And the funny bit was that when I changed my job, I went to Delhi and he was in Pune. So therein our try started with this 2-city marriage or 2-city family, as it would be. And we didn't know at that point of time that this would be a recurrent pattern in our life. And many a times we've just gone along and think, we'll see how it'll work. We'll make it work. So again, I go back to the point of having the will to make it work. But I think it was easier when you didn't have children. So we moved around, we went to Singapore, we went to New York, sometimes he followed me, sometimes I followed him. And I think when we were in London, we had 2 kids by then, and our kids were also slightly more older. So they had a view about what we wanted to do in our lives. So when my husband changed his job, after he'd worked for Leavers for a long time, and then he finally decided to come back to India as a CEO of another company, I wasn't ready. I had just got promoted into a very big role. I had, there was a financial crisis going on. I thought I was playing a critical part of it. I wanted to have that experience. And we were conflicted. One of the easiest options would be, okay, you know what, divorce him, find another husband. But that was not to be. So I decided, we had a long chat, and I think that was the first time we decided to do a split family with the children. And for a while, the children were with me, and then the children moved to India. I think I was probably more nervous because I'd never stayed without my children. And but I think it's probably, what was I nervous about? I didn't know how I'll make this work. I was nervous about the fact, how will I stay without them? I was nervous about the fact whether I'll be able to handle the stress of the travel. But the fact is, whether I could do it or not do it, I wouldn't know till I did it. Right? And every time I go through this debate, the question in my mind is, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that would happen is I wouldn't be able to cope up. I would leave this job, find myself something else in India. Well, that's okay. That's not such a bad thing. But so then let me try it out. Right? And that's what pushed me to try it out. And, boy, I'm glad I did, because I think it was a great experience. And when you really want to do something with all honesty and sincerity, I think people around you make it work. On the family front, when I moved my children, my parents stepped in and helped out in terms of just getting the kids settled in. On the other side, my organization stepped up, because half the time I was on the plane traveling between Delhi and London. But I think maybe having an equity, having a relationship made it work. But I think everybody around me understood that I was trying to make it work. And because of which people are patient and they helped me make it work. My work didn't suffer. I got my next bigger break after that. But I have to tell you, when you do something like that, first of all, you have to earn the equity. You have to make sure you make yourself worth it, and people are willing to step up on you. It can't be that, I haven't really worked that hard, but I'm going to expect the organization to stand behind me when I want to do something as crazy as this. So I think, once I've done it, it was funny when I came back to India, because by then my kids had settled down in Gurgaon. And, I came back to my current job in Bombay, and I was interviewing with Prameet. And we had this funny moment where he said, okay, let's get started. And I said, well, there's a small twist. I'm not moving the family from Gurgaon to Mumbai, because the kids are very well settled. It'd be quite a pain for them to go through the school and all of that. So honestly, he just sat back in his chair and looked at me. He said, why is your ecosystem always disturbed? Why can't all of you be in one location at one point of time? And I laughed like you, Mamata, and I said, but what's the problem? I'm on the same time zone. I don't have to look at the watch, talk to my children. And then, I very candidly said, I said, Prameet, you're worried because I'm a mother. What if if my husband was sitting here? And he just laughed and he said, chalo, let's get on with it. And, and the fact is, it's been, 3.5, 4 years since I'm doing Mumbai, Delhi. Everybody's used to me going back and forth. I have some very strict rules, like I don't work the weekends because that's my family time. I have a team which steps up. My boss is used to it. I'm a BlackBerry addict because obviously I work a lot more remotely. So I think it's about making things work. Flexibility is not just about working from home. Flexibility also means you work harder to make sure you keep the connect going. And how do you keep it going? And that's left to every individual to figure it out. So I think traveling job is stressful. It's a myth. Is usually when you haven't traveled. Because once you get used to a traveling job, the world becomes so small. I travel 3 weeks in a month, and, I'm in and out. I zip in and out of home. I'm here in Bombay. I'm back in Delhi tomorrow for a day. Then I'm off to London for 2 days. But it's just that the whole system works around it. Also, you got to be very disciplined when you're traveling. Because you got to make sure that, I'm not joking, but literally I would sit with my maid or my cook and say, this is the schedule, this is what you're going to make. And sometimes my husband gets very upset and he's like, if I try and change it, she won't let me change it. But you got to plan, and you got to prioritize about what you want to do. So, to an extent, my social life on the weekends wouldn't be as vibrant because I was, I want to spend time with the kids and I will not go partying because, that's how I prioritize. So I think travel is a way of, you can look at it different ways and say, great exposure. And for a period of time, I want to do this. I want to see different places. I want to meet different clients. I want to meet different associates. And that exposure in a different way will grow you as well. But obviously, it comes with a way of how you make it work with proper discipline into your life.
Excellent. Thank you, Anu. Thank you. And in fact, you've given me a lot of fodder for a discussion later tonight with my husband. I was telling him, how to manage when you're traveling.
Right.
But the other thing that comes across, Anu, is something that you mentioned. If it is something that I love doing, then I will make things work. And this is what I try and, stress upon when I'm talking to different women, that explore, so then you'll know what is out there and you might find something that you really love doing. And once you find that, you will make things work. I really believe that all of us have that capacity to actually juggle, to actually make things work for ourselves, whatever it may be. I think I have quite a few questions, but I just wanted one organization-related question here, after which I think I will hand over to the audience. Now, I am of the perception, Anu, and I might be right or wrong, but when we have these practices within an organization, and many organizations, like you said, gender diversity has become core to every organization's HR. But if you look at the practices, they are particularly for women, flexi for women, these kind of interventions or training programs for women per se. But some organizations, and I think one example is Deloitte, believe that we don't want to differentiate you. We want to create a more inclusive environment. So whatever workshops they have, I believe the workshops are open to everyone. The flexible working hours, if it's open for women, it's open for the men as well. If there's maternal sick leave for the child, then they also give it to the fathers. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's about creating an inclusive work environment and not positively discriminating for either sex. The only point, and I think in city, for example, we have flexibility for both men and women, and both men and women exercise that. It's not singularly offered to women, and also recently, for example, we keep talking about maternity leave. In city, we had paternity leave, which was all of 5 days, and most organizations, for some reason, have it for 5 days. We've actually taken it for a month now. So men can go off on paternity leave for a month, fully paid, and that's it. And their wives may not be working with city, bear that in mind. And we have more men than women working in city in a racial sense. So they can get home. And I actually wanted to do 2 months, but I didn't get my way through. Hopefully in my next turn, I'll get it to 2 months. But I think we have to create an inclusive and an equitable environment. And some of the policies and flexibilities that we offer has to be offered to both the genders. Having said that, I think there are issues that we are managing which are gender specific, which are very socio-culturally driven. Sensitivity to environment is being one of them. I think if you're a majority, and people will tell you that if you're a majority, you don't even notice that there is any problem in the environment because you've defined the rules.
Yes.
It's only if you're a minority will you figure out that this does not really work for me because somebody XYZ hasn't really thought through how this works. And I'll take away from the men and women example. I was in a workshop in London very recently, and there was an experiment which was carried out. There were 3 women, there were 4 women, 2 white, 1 black, and 1 brown, which is me. And the question, it was in a context of, how things happen at work and getting up in the morning, what do you see in the mirror? Now, if you haven't worked in London, you may have a different answer to this, but so when we were at the panel, when the white woman was asked, she said, look, when I get up in the morning, I see myself as a woman, right? And whereas, when I was asked, I said, I see myself as an Indian woman or a South Asian woman. Because I'm working with 2 different sets right now, as a woman and as a South Asian in a predominantly white society. Right?
Wow.
When I was working as a management committee member of the investment bank team in London, the first time I walked into the management team, around the table, there were a bunch of white males, 45 and above. I introduced myself and I said, I have color from every perspective on this table. So I think I agree that the policies and processes can be applied to everybody equally, but I think the sensitivity bit is different because the issues that men and women face are very different. A lot of men I know, including in city today, may not even have their wives working. So how would they be sensitive to a career woman in their life when they don't know what really goes on for that career woman? So here is a classic example where we recently had this situation where a manager thought that I should, provide flexibility for this mother who's coming back from work because she's going to need this flexibility, right? Because she's got a young baby. And actually, there's an article to this today in Times of India as well. And what he did not realize is that woman did not want any flexibility. She wanted a full-time job. So as a result, we had a miscommunication between these 2 individuals where the manager, out of sheer well-meaning intention, was trying to put her on flexi schedule. And the employee said, well, I don't really want it because I've got it all sorted. I want to come back and pursue my career. So they're just operating from a different lens of how they see the world and what each other is trying to do. And the only thing which can bridge this is communication and understanding and being sensitive to each other. So I think that level of sensitivity has to be different. Also, the way men and women are brought up is very different even till date in the society. A boy child, the way he's brought up, the toys they play, what they do is very different than a girl child. So this translates into workplace. And as a result, we find ourselves pushing women to aspire for more. And a classic example for this is, when they call it a tiara syndrome. There's a classic research, and Mamata, you might have come across this, where, when you post a job, not post a job. Actually, let me share a personal example. I have men and women both working in the team. And last year when I was appraising them, most men, if they've achieved 10 or 5 of the 10 targets, rate themselves 1 or 2, where 1 is the best and 5 is the poor one. Women, if they've achieved 7 out of 10 targets, tend to rate themselves middle of the pack, which is 3. Because of the self-esteem and this aspiration that they carry vis-a-vis their careers or about themselves. Men will turn around and say, look, Anu, those targets were stretch targets anyways. I achieved 50% of a stretch target, so I must be really good, right? And the woman is saying, hey, you know what? I should have done 100%. I should have been a perfectionist. And if I've got 7 out of 10, I'm not good enough. Now, this is a mindset that they have been groomed with since childhood. So women aspired less, and I think men aspired more because they're told you've got to be the bread earner, so go out and conquer the world. Woman is told calm down because if you get too aggressive, it's a negative trait associated with you. So with men, I always say get real, and with women, I always say rise to the occasion because, that's where the balancing act will happen.
Excellent. In fact, on this point, I had another longish kind of question, but I think I will hold off and I will give some time to the audience to see if they have any questions for you. And Anu, I think we both can have this discussion for a really long time. I will get in touch with you separately. I would really like to talk.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Over to the audience, we are really happy to open the session out to you. Please let us know if you have any questions. You can type them in the chat box, and Sashina or I will read out the questions to you. Audience, any questions, please? You can also click on the raise hand button, and then we can hand over the mic to you so you can actually speak and ask the question. All right, I see. Okay, there's one question from Shri Purna here. She says, hello, Anuranjita. I really respect your way of handling things, but most women are not able to do what you have done. You have mentioned that in Citibank, there are more men than women. So being an HR professional while recruiting, do you really keep yourself as a benchmark? And that is the reason women don't match up to your expectation?
When we hire, especially at the entry level, let me tell you, we hire 50% women. So it's a very, very equitable ratio, okay? Yeah. And along the journey, as I say, there is a leakage which happens. The leakage happens because of a combination of the socio-cultural factors, which I've already alluded to, and the 3M crossroads, which is very real. And for those of you who are yet at campus, when you get out there, I mean, I can't emphasize this more. There's a lot of investment that you have put in terms of, your education. So don't let yourself just get sucked into what the traditional norms are. So the leakage happens because of these factors. And the toughest one is maternity. Most organizations will tell you that's where women leave. So the challenge is actually till mid-level, I don't have such a crisis. The problem starts to happen when you get to a leadership journey. Yep. And I think the leadership journey is, in my view, and you will get very contradictory views on these, is actually leadership journey is gender agnostic. Because I feel that my husband doesn't have it any easier than I do. It goes back to how driven you are and your will to carry on. Because it isn't easy. And as you get into, senior level, the pyramid starts to narrow. There are fewer positions. And you know what? Everything is fair in love and war. So if people want to throw your gender at you, they will. The question is, are you up for it? Are you up for the game? And I'll tell you, realistically and pragmatically, this is what we witness is some people will persist, and some of us are yet here. some women will come around and say, well, my husband earns enough. I don't need to go through this. I will do some part-time or I will do some consulting because this is too political. And the whole thing about being organizationally savvy is not something you're always taught in the classroom. You have to pick it up as you go. You have to understand to read the dynamics in an organization. It isn't easy, right? So, and I'm sorry to keep going back to the socio-cultural factors, but it's just huge in my mind. It's simple things like when you get into a boardroom, women speak less. Women speak less because they are told you need to be, or they have this view about, I don't want to annoy anybody. I want to be this nice person. Right? The moment you exert a viewpoint, somebody will get upset because they may not like what you're saying. If I'm too pushy, too aggressive, people are going to go after me because an aggressive woman, as a stereotype, is not perceived positively. Are you willing to live with that stereotype? So I think, in Citibank, what we try and do is at mid to senior levels, we provide a huge amount of mentoring. We also provide something called sponsorship, which is, where women find it difficult to network and push themselves. There is somebody who knows you well, can support you and open up careers for you. But finally, what you make out of those opportunities is completely dependent on you. So I think in an organization, we try and manage it, but finally, we can only push up to a point. It will also be governed by what aspiration you have for yourself and how far are you willing to push. If you come along, and this is what happened with me, and maybe I was fortunate, if I was willing to do Delhi-London, which was a bold decision, the organization stepped up by saying, okay, we will support you for staying in London. We will support you on travel costs. We will let you work remotely. But had I not made that decision, where was the question about anybody giving me that support?
Increasingly, I see that whatever we say, and this is good news for me, that a lot of things allude to the fact that it is still in our hands. It is something we can do about. It is traits and characteristics that we have. I think we just need to be more aware that we have these characteristics. We're scared to negotiate. We're scared to take risks. So if you're aware of it, then we can find the right interventions to actually manage these characteristics. And that's good news. It's very little about what the society does for me, what the organization does, or what my manager does for me. So,
and I just, Mamata, just want to take a minute because the question was, do you keep yourself as a benchmark? And the answer is, I don't think I'm a benchmark. I think the benchmark has to be better than me. And the benchmark is really the leadership capabilities of Citibank. And that's what we will assess anybody against, men or women. So it isn't assessed against one individual. It's assessed against a set of competencies and behaviors that we would do for any senior leader, irrespective of the gender.
Okay. So I have another question here from Kanchan, and she says, there have been increasing incidents of women and even children being molested in the society. I think for the focus of this topic, we'll keep it to women. How do you think these issues can be handled? And to make it more, specific to what we're talking about, this did come up as an issue in one of our earlier webinars as well, where the younger women employees said they do face quite a bit of this. And they wanted to know how they can actually manage these situations and how the issue can be handled.
So one is, I would say, zero tolerance. I've worked in New York, London, and I see those environments. They're completely zero tolerance. What we're dealing with in India right now is yet an evolution because it's a very patriarchal society. That's really the honest answer. So when you have a patriarchal society, there are a certain status ascribed to a man and a woman. And some of the increasing incidents we see is not about the act itself. It's a statement of power. It's a statement of importance. It's a statement of power about who is more powerful than the other sex. And that is what results in some of these instances. I mean, so it is unfortunate, but yes, there have been these incidents which have been happening. And in my view, the question, how do you think these issues can be handled? Well, the answer I would give it is in the context of workplace. One is zero tolerance. If you see anything happening around you which in any way is compromising your modesty, or I could say a respect at work issue, talk about it, take it headlong. Because I think today the legislation is such, forget about the execution of it, but the legislation gives huge rights to women about what they can do and what they can't do and their confidentiality. So leverage that for all the right reasons. The second thing is, sometimes I get issues about safety of women when they're traveling outside work, because as corporates, we can control what's happening inside the workplace, but not always outside. Now, that's a big concern for a lot of corporates. So for most corporates where women leave late, we provide vehicles, we provide security guards, depending on what time you're leaving office. But I think it's also about, those are what we are doing today. But at a macro level, I think this is about changing mindsets. I'm a mother of a 18-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son. But when I bring up my daughter, I'm not just telling her, oh, she has to have a career and she has to do this. I'm also bringing up my son in a way that he has to respect women. He has to also, wash dishes. He has to make beds. And I'm sure his wife will thank me for this. But the fact is, as mothers, how are we bringing up the next generation of men will decide how they view, the other sex going forward. But that's at a much more macro level. And it's going to take much longer than we would like it to, but that's a generational change that we have to bring about. But I think at work, whenever these instances happen, to me, it has to be zero tolerance. You have to have the courage to take it headlong. You read a lot about it in the media. And by the way, it is true. I anchor, for example, now we have, every organization has to have an ICC. I chair the ICC. ICC is like a, mini court. For example, what comes to ICC, I cannot even disclose to the CEO. I have to report it to the regulator straight. So it is a very, very close process. And if you don't get, you don't feel you've been given justice in the process in a corporate, move on. You have enough recourse available. But my view is these incidents have already been there. I don't think they're increasing. I just think the awareness levels have been risen. So now we are talking much more about that, and many more women are coming forward to talk about it. I think at my time when I joined work, it's not that these didn't happen. It's just that most women didn't know how to handle it or how to come in and even talk about it. There was no ICC. Today we are debating there are 10% women leaders. The time I came into work, there were 3%. So you have more women. The progress is happening, albeit at a smaller level. So reach out to your network, reach out to your support, reach out to your officials in your workplace, and hopefully they will guide you in terms of how to manage it.
Excellent. I hope that answers your question, Kanchan. Anita has a question. This is regarding travel. How to educate managers, being male or female, to give travel opportunities equally for both men and women. Most of the time it is being presumed that a woman with kids cannot travel cannot travel. How to overcome this kind of situation? So I picked the question because it's very different. She's talking about, I need the opportunity, but I think I'm being differentiated.
Yeah, I think, you will have these issues where a man, this is unconscious biases, right? Where a man will assume just because you've had a child, you cannot travel. It's not a very unusual situation. And by the way, let me also tell you why this happens is because there will be women who will go out and say, look, I don't want to travel, right? So that reinforces their belief and their belief about the fact that if you have a young kid, she will find it difficult to travel. And the only way you can probably bridge it by communicating and over-communicating on this. And by getting out there and saying, look, I want to do it, and here is the reason I want to do it. Don't sit there and wait for somebody to reach out to you. I've had these situations where, I was put on a lighter job, and I mentioned that in the book, till I reached out to my manager saying, I don't want to do it. I will leave the bank if you don't put me into the right job, because I just don't want to leave a 3-month baby at home and come here and twiddle my thumbs. So then I was put into the right job. But I think having that conversation and making them aware that you probably are slightly different and you want to be out there will hopefully go a long way in them understanding you better. And what happens is when you do 1 or 2 travel trips on work and it all works out fine, this unconscious bias will start to break apart. But keep pushing, keep communicating till you get what you want.
Yep. Okay. Well, I was scrolling through the other questions, quite a few interesting ones. I'm not sure which to pick. But this thread is something that you touched upon earlier, so I want to bring this in. you were also referring to some kind of macro interventions, right? And I think it's a lot of women have brought this up with me as well. How to raise our children today? Do I raise them as boys? Do I tell my girls that you're no different? But the particular question here is it correct to explain our career aspirations to our children 10 years plus so that they understand and support us? Or would they feel that we are more interested in our career and not in them?
Look, it's a brilliant question. And finally, it's all about relationships, right? So let me give you an instance. When I went back to work and my daughter shortly after that started a play school when she was 14 or 15, maybe 18 months old. And one day after the play school, she came back home very excited and said, "Mom, I figured something." And I was like, "What happened?" And she said, "You know, there are mamas who don't go to office. They also sit at home." Right? So her universe was that all mamas work because, at that point of time, all my friends were working and she was growing up thinking, that's normal life. So it depends on how you bring up your children and what you make them understand. I think all mothers, working or not working, always have a very special bond with their children and at no cost want that vitiated. I think what happens is that, at least in my experience, when I worked, there were times which were only kiddie times and there were times which were only work times. And my children have grown up with that expectation. They also, now that they're much older, they feel very proud about what I do. So, now my 18-year-old turns around saying, "Mom, I'm really glad you didn't give up work for me because I wouldn't know how to live with that guilt because now she doesn't need me as much." So again, this goes back to how much long-term a view you want to take. But I think when you talk to your children and they're very young, so for example, when I was doing Delhi, London, my daughter was 11, my son was about 6.5, 7. So they were pretty young. And, when we had a conversation, we realized they obviously didn't understand this fully, but they needed to know what was really going on with their parents. They needed to understand this because they were going to have to deal with it as well. And they saw that we were closely knit. We had this transparent conversation in front of them. We actually gave them some choices, saying, "You want to stay with Mama in London, or you want to go with Daddy to India for a while? What do you guys want to do?" And then we help them navigate towards those choices. Obviously, as much younger children, they really don't know which way they want to go. They get excited with little things. But I think children, how much ever young they are, they always appreciate the effort that you make to connect with them, not always the time that you spend with them. You can always be at home, but if you're only watching TV, you're not spending that quality time. So when my son, my son is performing somewhere, I will take that one day out of my work schedule, travel to his school. That means a lot to him, and that means a lot to me. So I think at 10 years, they start to understand what Mama and Papa are kind of trying to do and how much do they really love them. And I think it's that feeling which keeps them going. There will always be those tough moments where you're traveling, you're at work, your child has fallen unwell. But that goes back to my point. You may be at home and the child will fall unwell again. But the child will get okay and life will move on. And I can tell you all working mothers have faced that problem at some point in their career. But I think it's that bond, it's that relationship. When you are with them, be with them, talk to them about your work, tell them what you like about their work, inspire them through your work, and don't make it a drudgery and tell them that it keeps you away from them. That is when they start to detest you going to office. The other issue is when the comparisons happen, when, so-and-so mama doesn't go to work and you go to work and you're not there to pick me up from school. And I have this perennial grouse with schools because they kind of always schedule things assuming mamas are at home, which is not the case.
I understand. Yeah.
Right? But at that point of time, draw them out to dual working couples. Draw them out because there will always be, in a class of 20 kids, there will be 15 mothers who don't work, 5 who do work. Talk to them about it. Talk to them about, other women in the infrastructure. What I do, what has really helped me is sometimes getting my children to my workplace. And making them a part of it and making them feel very proud of what I do. And honestly, it came to a point, one day I was really upset with my work and I went home and I said, "Bas ab bahut ho gaya. I'm going to leave Citibank." My son turned around and said, "No, you can't leave Citi. I mean, it's almost like this is home. How can you do that? I'm like, really? I said, what have I done to you? I mean, so I think it's building that understanding, building that connect, and it takes effort. But
Yes.
it's drawing them into and making them part of their larger work ecosystem as well.
I mean, I can so relate to that. I've taken the Wi-Fi password from my children's school. So every time my son has a match, I actually take my laptop there, connect to the Wi-Fi and work from there. And people ask me, what's the score? I said, I don't know what's the score. They said, why are you there then? I said, I'm there because I just want my son to know that I'm here. That's all.
Right.
So, okay. So one last question, Anu, if you have time.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So this is from Soundarya, and she says, Anu, as you are in HR, I thought it would be good to ask you this. Nowadays, there are many organizations during recruitment, they discriminate women based on their appearance. What is your opinion on this, and how do you think we can overcome this? A very sensitive question, but I thought.
No, fair enough. Look, I don't think there are many organizations who would just not hire anybody based on their appearance, and I certainly don't believe if there is a bias operating about hiring people who look a certain type, it will apply equally to men and women. Now, you could have recruiters who may have unconscious bias operating with a certain sex. That's obviously not the right way of recruiting. But if you are ever interviewing in an interview where you feel that kind of bias is operating, my view is to call it out. Having said that, I think whenever you go for an interview, you have to be professionally dressed, is the way I would put it. Because the way you project yourself externally, your first impression, anybody is going to look at you and going to say, okay, are you looking professional? Are you looking attentive? Are you looking somebody I can relate to? And your nonverbal cues, how you look, what you say, how you your small etiquette will be your first impressions in the first 5 minutes when you meet somebody. And that applies in any interview. And by the way, in my view, that applies for both men and women, not just for women.
Okay.
And I think, and I think it's only after that, when you get into a full-fledged interview about, what you do and, what experience you have and what you bring to the table, that people go into a deep dive. But be honest, I haven't come across such issues, at least in my experience. I would just say that it would play negative for both men and women if you don't come across professional in your first impression. So I would not advise you to get into an interview, whether you go informally dressed or formally dressed. I mean, today in digital age, a lot of organizations do not require you to be in, a suit or a formally dressed attire. But having said that, you've got to come across as a professional. And depending on who you're interviewing with, I would say suit the mood and go professionally dressed so that you create the right impression and, you hopefully, negate any biases that might be operating there. But don't if you do feel that in any interaction, you're getting a sense that there is an attempt to hire somebody, quote unquote, who's good looking because there's a certain job to it, my advice would be don't join them. That's all.
I know. Okay. Okay. So one last question, Anu.
Sure.
Again, this is something we talked about, and I wanted to get an organizational perspective as well to this. So this is from Neepa. She says, you mentioned in your earlier conversation that women do not ask the right things or do not ask so much as men for the work we do. I mean, basically remuneration and salary negotiations. What can be some qualities and skills that we can work or develop in ourselves to avoid these situations? In fact, this is a question I had too, that from an organization's perspective, what kind of interventions or training you think will help us get more aware of our characteristics and get over them, like, be bolder, ask for what we believe in, be more vocal, plan our careers, have those difficult conversations, etc.
So I will say, well, a couple of things. One is developing a better self-confidence, because I think when you are confident, it will come across in the way you communicate, how you project yourself, and how people will judge you or negotiate with you will depend on how confident they feel are you of yourself. Because, when you enter the corporate world, there are, people will look, it's when you go and negotiate for a salary package, if anybody can walk away with a better deal from an organization point of view by subsidizing you, they will. So I think developing that self-confidence is extremely important. Self-confidence will come when you feel you are, you're doing the right work. So obviously you've got to be sure about what you're doing. You will feel that you are benchmarked rightly. And you also feel that you're willing to work out if you're being subsidized beyond a point. What I often find is many women know, for example, I'm just talking about equal pay, many women outside who are working know that they're getting 25% lesser than what a previous incumbent was getting. Maybe it was a man, but they continue working. The question is, have you called it out? Because as an organization, if you call it out and you say, look, I know I'm getting subsidized, and you know what, I wouldn't be here too long if you don't really fix it. So, what is the right thing for the employer? Either they lose a great talent, and then the cost of hiring is much higher. But if you don't come and talk about it, nobody's necessarily going to pick up this battle for you. So have the confidence in everything that you do. Project yourself better. So that confidence is absolutely key. The second thing I would say is connect. Network, get yourself more aware, get yourself stronger by getting a platform to talk from, develop better skills, keep renewing yourself, because when you know that you are good, it will also feed your confidence. And getting that networking and the whole connect piece, and I've kind of referred a lot of it in the book as well, getting out there, reaching out to people, having a mentor, talking to people about how you want to navigate, will also give you ideas about, what you need to ask for. What does the world out there have? What you are doing which could be done differently, what you should ask for, what you're not getting. So I would say if there are two areas to focus, it will be confidence and it will be connect. And underlying all of this would be courage. And a courage and a conviction of deserving what you really deserve.
Excellent. Neepa, I hope that answers your question. Anu, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today and answering all the questions. To the audience, I know we skipped a few questions, but I will take note of all of these questions. And Anu, if you wouldn't mind, I will kind of compile these questions and send them over to you. So when you have the time, you can share a few words with us, and I can share it back with the participants. But I know you're rushing, and I don't want to hold you back anymore. Happy Women's Day, and again, thank you so much. Any last words for our participants, please?
Well, heartfelt thanks to all of you. I mean, I wish I had more time. I've been looking at some of the questions, and they are really, really thought-provoking. And as I'm sure in the last 1 hour, you figure out that I can talk and talk and talk. Most often, people have to tell me to stop. But, I'm happy to answer all these questions once Mamata sends that to me. I would just end by saying, where I started when, believe in yourself and take a bet on yourself, because if you don't, nobody else will. So with that, I would just end a happy Women's Day to all of you. And I hope you go flying from one place to another. If you ever need to reach out to me with any mentoring help, do reach out. I'm always available to young and upcoming talent, because I do believe you are the future. So selfishly, I would best in you because you're my future as well. So thank you again. Thank you very much. Pleasure talking to you. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
To the rest of you, well, we just have a little bit more if you can stay on. I thought I'd summarize the session, but I think Anu has done it very well herself. So few things that come across is, yes, making our choices, being clear about the choices we've made, creating that kind of support system, getting over certain characteristics that kind of limit us in our career, not hesitating to lean in, try and explore, so we find something that we are really passionate about, not to forget taking care of ourselves. But going on, Shashina, slide 15, please. Well, we have this group. We'd like to continue these conversations so we find answers So we all have problems, and I'm sure sometimes the solutions are very near us. So we'd like all of you to join our LinkedIn group here. We have a lot of women already in the group who kind of share, someone asked for babysitting arrangements and so on. So we're hoping to have more of these conversations and build a support system through the social media network. So please to take time to join in our networks here. Just briefly to share that we do have some of our programs as well, which I mentioned earlier. We have a program on women's leadership, which we run. I mean, if any of you are interested in the program or would like to nominate some of your organizational members, you can reach out to us. You have our email IDs, and we'll be happy to share the details with you. We have some for senior women leaders and also for emerging women leaders. Slide 20, Sashina, please. With that, thank you all for joining us in such large numbers, for all the enthusiasm and support. And what I'd like is for you to give us the feedback on topics that you'd like to hear on, and then we can arrange for those sessions. It could be workshops or skill-based webinars or conversations. We'd be happy to take in all that feedback and arrange the relevant sessions for you. Again, wishing all of you a very happy Women's Day, and let's celebrate what we have, what we've done, the choices that we've made, and everything about being a woman. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, all of you.